Esports, closing Africa's digital divide.
Okay, welcome guys, and you can see behind us we have Dean Akinobi. Hi Dean, how are you? It's a pity you're not here.
Yes, great. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Hi.
Dean and I have been on many panels together. I'm looking forward to chatting to you. So first of all, I'd like to ask everybody to give a brief introduction of themselves and their company and what they do, and then we'll jump into our conversation. So Douglas, if you'd like to start.
Thanks so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Douglas Ogeto from Africa Esports Championship. We are Africa's premier esports league. We run esports tournaments across 16 African countries with the whole idea of identifying, supporting, and championing young professional e-athletes to be able to play it on a professional level. Thank you.
Okay, Robert?
Hi, my name is Robert Toth. I'm a business development manager and key account manager at GlobalBet. I work at GlobalBet for the past 13 years. And thank you for the organizers for inviting me to this panel. Since virtual sports is very similar with esports, I think I can add some value to this. Yeah, looking forward to this conversation. It will be a very interesting panel.
Okay, and Dean, we're over to you.
Yes, hi all. Sorry I can't be there. Unfortunately, couldn't make it in London. It's very cold. But Dean Akinjobi, CEO of Football Media. Football Media, we're a digital advertising and sponsorship agency with a network reach of over 100 million unique users. We work with multiple betting brands across Africa and across the world. Esports is quite a big area of what we do because we have access to a number of esports influencers. And yeah, really excited about the panel. Yeah, connectivity in Africa. It's a major, it's a big area of topic of conversation for esports. So yeah, really excited about it. It's a shame I can't physically be there. So.
We can see you. You can't see us, but we can see you perfectly, Dean.
I know, it's kind of weird now.
you're talking to a blank screen, aren't you? Okay, Douglas, I want to start with you. So, the popularity of esports has been globally growing. I mean, it has been something that has emerged from 0 to 60 very fast in the last couple of years. What has its growth been in Africa? Because it's broadly speaking, I think it's safe to say football is the dominant market here. But how has esports kind of claimed its own share, and how big is that share?
Thanks for the question. So, of course, esports has been growing. Of course, well, as you say, globally it's growing very fast. But the good thing on the continent is that it's also now catching up. I'd say a good part of the continent has esports players, of course, with varying degree of participation. So, for example, in 2018, when we ran some of that championships, we had small economies like Madagascar participating. Of course, countries like Madagascar wouldn't appear in a normal, economic discussion. But then the good thing is that esports is now helping young people get into mainstream participation. Of course, this follows, as you say, the general football fan base. So some of the popular games, of course, are FIFA, because people then can relate to some of the big people within the context of a video game.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. It's really good. So it is actually the football is bringing in the e-gaming on football events is bringing in.
Yeah.
I hadn't actually thought of that crossover. So, I mean, is that the core part of acquisition, or is there a demographic that just comes in and they're betting on DOD and games like that?
COD.
COD. Oh yeah, sorry, I'm thinking of Dungeons & Dragons. No, Call of Duty and COD.
So football, of course, is the basic entry level, but we usually say back in the day before the internet became mainstream, of course, there are a lot of cyber cafes. Where it goes, send your email. But now the flip side is this quote-unquote cyber cafes are now becoming gaming cafes. Again, you have to, if you look at the consoles, it's usually said that if a console is, let's say, $1 in the US, by the time it gets here and you include taxes, it's already 3 times more. So most people can't afford a normal PlayStation at home, so the gaming cafes become the entry point. But of course, the interest has now grown. Of course, if you look at connectivity and now access to gaming cafes, it means that now there's a broad interest from strategy games to fighting games to football. But I'd probably say this, of course, if you look at West Africa, for example, they're more into fighting games as compared to like East Africa, where it's more like football based and strategy. Because if you look at Sub-Saharan Africa has one of the best internet compared to like our friends in West Africa. So people on this side can be able to play more, stronger games as compared to like FIFA, which is just a 1 versus 1 kind of game.
And Dean, I mean, do you want to jump in on this, because given your background on football, do you see the football and the sports type games being more of an attraction for bettors than the kind of the traditional COD games? Thanks, Douglas, and fighting style games.
Yeah, we see a lot of interest with football, because obviously there's a natural synergy with the one of the biggest sports in the world, and also the growth and interest across Africa. I mean, what we do is, like, from our point of view, it's really about thinking about how you actually stage those tournaments. So working with an esports gamer to try and to has a simulation of, let's say, this coming weekend we have Manchester United versus Arsenal. So it's about how you create those simulated real-time gaming experiences. So you're having the user bet on the physical game, but also a bet on the digital aspect as well. So creating those unique opportunities. But that said, it's interesting that the point that Douglas made is about looking at West Africa and East Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa penetration of the internet. So that's obviously it's reflective in the type of games that people play. So obviously FIFA's a 1-on-1. But you have multiple games that are multiplayer that obviously use up much more bandwidth. And obviously, part of the topic of today is obviously talking about connectivity. So I think if you're looking at games such as League of Legends globally on Twitch, for example, it's had about 43 billion streams, and imagine the participation there. If you look at the continent of Africa, considering that I think it's in 2021, it was like around 33% of people were using the internet. So I think that is there's a big picture of FIFA and football games, but I think the wider picture here is like looking at connectivity and what can actually be done about that, so the African continent and people can actually participate in esports and broaden the economy, because I think we're losing out on the opportunity to participate at scale.
And Robert, I mean, you were saying that there's kind of a similarity between the kind of the virtuals and the esports. What is that similarity, you think, and how does that play into this?
Well, just to give an example with the football, one of our main products in Africa is virtual football, where in the Pro Series we actually recorded real football players. All the animations, all the motions are based on real professional football players. And we provide this virtual football game to punters, and it's a very good entry also into esports, because a lot of people between 18 and 30 years old, if they are not familiar with esports but they know virtual sports, it's a very good entry towards esports.
But with esports, and this is something I think there's often a kind of a disconnect between the fact that the esports players are not the punters betting on the esports players. And so I think there's, one thing that I feel, and this may or may not be correct, and you guys can tell me, is whether or not there is enough, there's enough knowledge at the punter level. Like, you can ask any football punter and they can tell you, what goal was scored, at what time in what match, 10 years ago. But they don't have the same, there isn't the same element of knowledge, just by virtue of it being kind of so new with esports. So how are you getting, putting the football aside and talking about, the teams of predominantly, younger men playing the games and all around the world, because it is incredible. I mean, one of the winning teams of a competition sponsored by Red Bull, I believe, the team of 4 guys won more than the third place football team in the World Cup that year. And I mean, that's just mind-boggling. But nobody knows them. Nobody knew. They were new. It's like people are like, okay, I know the third place football team, but who are these guys? So how are you building the knowledge?
Interesting question. So if I understand you correctly, how are you building the knowledge of esports?
For the punters, yeah. everybody knows Cristiano Ronaldo,
True.
right? Who is the Cristiano Ronaldo of esports?
Okay. Yeah. So thanks for the question. So I think for us, of course, it's more like a proactive approach in terms of when we're doing events. Of course, there's a social campaign in terms of spotlighting the players because, as you say, not many people know who these esports players are, but also maybe just to twist your question a bit. The esports players are not, of course, the people putting the bet on the players, because we also have this thing where we're trying to tell people esports is actually not gambling, because esports is actually a professional skill that you can grow, while gambling, of course, is a game of chance. But having said that, one of the key things we're trying to do is demystifying esports for the parents. So what we do is that when we're running the campaign, of course, you have to, or rather the esports event, you then try and make sure that the messaging, of course, appeals to the player, appeals to the parent, and then, of course, appeals to the brands, because esports, is one of the fastest growing channels where brands can be able to get.
Is that not? And I'll address this to you, Dean, and Douglas. I'm sure you'll have a view. It does concern me that it started out with the brands like Red Bull, like Coca-Cola, running the industry. And there's only now kind of emerging some, the equivalent of FIFA or the World Tennis Federation. There's only now emerging kind of a federation that governs the esports. And because of that, it is known to be one of the most, the most corruptible. There's not necessarily integrity. There's even the fact that the players are often they're often doped up on Adderall and performing drugs that are perfectly legal. How is that going to how can we bring all that into a regulated level playing field?
Well, I think it's an interesting question. I think that as more and more teams and for example, professional associations and, like, for example, football clubs are bringing on, creating their esports teams, I think that will actually create a uniformed effect whereby, just as you are if you are a player of Manchester United, West Ham, Leeds, whatever it is, Liverpool, esports person, you're naturally going to actually be vetted, and there's going to be a certain standard. I think that within the industry, I think if you're looking at sports, if you're looking at these people are athletes. I think people forget that it's not just a guy or girl playing. Yes, they physically playing a game, but these people have particular, like, sleeping regimes, physical regimes as well, so in order to actually perform at that particular level. So I think that as the industry has more professionalized governing bodies and sports teams becoming involved, that will obviously raise the standard. But that said, if someone's playing like League of Legends or World of Warcraft, it's just like by themselves within a particular tournament, it's very difficult to monitor sort of like the performance levels of whatever people might be taking, because are you going to I don't know, are you going to like semi drug test people prior to a tournament? I don't know if we're at that stage yet, but I think setting that professional industry level, led by sports teams and organizations, just as they do off the pitch, how they would do, just as they do on, how they do off the pitch in a digital environment. I think that is something that will be key.
Yeah, because the brands had no interest in doing that. Their vested interest was in the sponsorship and the money. But Douglas, do you agree with Dean on that?
Not yet.
Mm-hmm.
I think brands should have an interest in this, because if one of the players that a brand sponsors takes drugs, for example, or some stimulants that allow him to play more intensively and have better results, and this is found out, then it can have a negative impact on the brand as well. So.
I completely agree, because you just see that with all sponsorships, and I think the very first big one was Tiger Woods. That was when the first time we really saw brands distancing themselves from the person they sponsor. But my point is, I think that brands don't have a vested interest in the regulation side. Yes, they have an interest in protecting their own identity, but not necessarily in protecting the game. Whereas whereas protecting the game and the players and then having the integrity and the safety for the bettors, I think is where, we're necessary.
No, I think the flip side is, in as much as the brands might not be vested, the publishers who make the game are, of course, now making sure that the games meet the different regulation. So, of course, because of the breadth of the variety of games, of course, like Call of Duty, for example, will then create a regulation that says, just the same way movies have, the different viewership ages. So so you then find the publishers then creating that regulation to ensure that they're not able then to get to the wrong target market. So then maybe now the brands will then align and see what are our brand values, and then align to the publisher based on that kind of game.
Okay.
I think also to add on that, I think like you've got to look at if you're creating a big esports tournament, for example, anywhere around the world. I think that if you're bringing in, we've worked on opportunities with particular sponsors, so we wouldn't align a sponsor to a tournament that that we did research on, whereby players are basically on performance enhancing usages to increase their performance. So you have to be quite aware that sponsors have a responsibility as well. When for example, from our point of view, when aligning a brand with a tournament, for example, we'd be very cautious on understanding what's behind the tournament, who's the players, because the brand impact and the negativity that could expose a brand to could be astronomical. We've all seen what's happened with obviously Twitch shutting down a whole industry. But that's just a case in point, really. So it's really, from our point of view, really important that we're aligning a brand with a tournament or an esports ambassador, for example. We do our full due diligence, and that's really key.
Okay, are there any questions? I think we've run out of time. I could stay here for a long time, actually, especially because I think one of the things that you were saying, Dean, about it, it being a sport, there's actually, and I can make this available on the SiGMA website, there's actually an article that I discussed with the sports doctor in Malta, with the sports, and he was saying the number of times on average you move your wrist, I can't remember the numbers, so I'm just kind of giving you kind of the spectrum, is say 10 a minute, whereas somebody playing actively in an esports competition, it's something like 200. I mean, the magnitude is amazing. And so literally the physical vulnerability, you have a whole new type of injury. Anyway, we've run out of time. Douglas and Robert will be around. I think we're going to move on to the next session. Dean, it was really great to have you. I'm waving at you. And
waving back. Yeah.
Pity you can't be here, but it was really good to have you on screen. Thank you very much.
100% next time.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thanks for
Thank you everyone.